The family brunch invitation came via group text. Sunday, 11 a.m. The Pemberton. Celebrating Marcus's promotion to partner. Everyone attend. My older brother Marcus. Making partner at 35 at one of the city's most prestigious architecture firms. The golden child finally getting the recognition Dad had always predicted. I replied, "Congrats, Marcus. See you Sunday." Dad's response came privately, "Rachel, about Sunday. Need to discuss seating. Call me." I called from my apartment, a modest one-bedroom in a neighborhood my family considered up and coming, which meant not good enough yet. "Rachel, here's the situation. We've reserved a table at the Pemberton for the celebration. Marcus, obviously. Your mother and me. Aunt Claire and Uncle Richard. Marcus's fiancée Jennifer and her parents. Okay. The table seats 10. We're at capacity." I waited. "Your brother's celebration is important. The Carters, Jennifer's family, are very prominent. Her father sits on 3 corporate boards. This brunch is about making the right impression for Marcus's future." "I understand it's important, Dad. So you see why we need the seating to reflect success. Achievement. People who've made something of themselves." I worked as a freelance investigative journalist. 5 years writing for various publications, chasing stories about corporate corruption, environmental disasters, human rights violations. My byline had appeared in respected outlets, but the work was unpredictable, the pay inconsistent. My family saw it as unemployment with delusions of grandeur. What they didn't know was that 3 months ago, I'd broken the biggest story of my career. A massive investigation into a pharmaceutical company's cover-up of clinical trial data that had led to patient deaths. 8 months of research, interviews with whistleblowers, document analysis, legal review. The story published 2 weeks ago in The Atlantic. Within days, federal investigators opened an inquiry. The company's stock dropped 30%. The CEO resigned. Congressional hearings were scheduled. And yesterday Time magazine called. They were running a cover story about investigative journalism's role in corporate accountability. My pharmaceutical investigation was the centerpiece. The cover featured my photo with the headline, "The Journalists Who Hold Power Accountable." The issue hit newsstands Sunday morning. The same morning as Marcus's brunch. "So you're uninviting me from Marcus's celebration," I said. "Not uninviting. But there's a lovely coffee shop right across the street from the Pemberton. You could work there and we'll text you when brunch is wrapping up. You can come say hello to Marcus then. You want me to sit in a coffee shop while my family celebrates across the street. Just for the formal brunch part. The Carters need to see that Marcus comes from a family of accomplished people. You understand? Accomplished people." I'd uncovered corporate malfeasance that led to federal investigations, but I wasn't accomplished enough to sit at the table. "Does Marcus know about this?" It was his suggestion, actually. He's very focused on making the right impression. Of course it was. "I'll be at the coffee shop," I said. "Thank you for understanding. This means a lot to your brother." I hung up and looked at the email from Time on my laptop. The magazine's publicist had sent the final cover image. There I was, professional photo, serious expression, the headline bold above my name. The issue would be delivered to newsstands early Sunday morning. The Pemberton's newsstand was directly visible from their brunch tables. I'd been there enough times to know. I replied to Dad's text, "See you Sunday." Then I called my editor at Time. "The cover looks incredible. What time does it hit stands?" "Delivery trucks run between 6 and 8 a.m. on Sundays. Most high-traffic locations get restocked by 9. "Perfect." Sunday morning I woke at 9 and dressed carefully. Professional but casual, dark jeans, crisp white button-down blazer. Minimal makeup, hair pulled back. At 10:30 I walked to the Pemberton. The restaurant occupied a corner location in the city's most expensive neighborhood. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the street. The newsstand was positioned directly in front, impossible to miss from window tables. I watched from half a block away as the delivery truck pulled up. The vendor restocked the stand, placing new Time issues in the prominent front rack. My face stared out from 24 covers. Then I crossed to the coffee shop Dad had suggested. Small place, decent coffee, free Wi-Fi. I ordered an Americano and took a table by the window with a clear view of the Pemberton's interior. I could see my family's table. Window seats, prime location. Dad and Mom arrived first, dressed formally. Marcus and Jennifer appeared next, Jennifer's parents in tow. Jennifer's father had that distinguished look of old money, perfectly tailored suit, confident posture. Aunt Claire and Uncle Richard completed the party. 10 people at a table for 10. Every seat filled. They ordered mimosas. Made toasts. Laughed. Marcus beamed, his arm around Jennifer, the successful architect celebrating with his successful family. Not one of them looked toward the coffee shop where I sat. I opened my laptop and pretended to work, occasionally glancing up. Jennifer's mother was animated, clearly charmed. Dad was holding court, probably telling stories about Marcus's achievements. At 11:15, a couple approached the newsstand outside the Pemberton. They picked up Time, examined the cover. The woman pointed at my photo, said something to her companion. They purchased the magazine and walked past the Pemberton's windows, the cover clearly visible. Inside, no one noticed. At 11:30, a businessman in an expensive suit stopped at the newsstand. He grabbed Time, scanned the cover, then did a double take. He looked through the window at the restaurant, then back at the magazine, then at the restaurant again. He was looking at my family's table. Then at the magazine. Then at the table. He pulled out his phone. At 11:40, Jennifer's father stood to refill his mimosa. As he poured, he glanced out the window. The newsstand was directly in his sight line. He stopped mid-pour. Set down the bottle. Then he reached for his phone, typed something, showed it to Jennifer's mother. Her expression changed from pleasant conversation to confusion. She looked out the window. At the newsstand. At the Time covers with my face. Jennifer's father said something to the table. Everyone turned to look at him. He pointed out the window. My entire family turned to stare at the newsstand. Marcus's face went pale. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. Dad's expression cycled through confusion, shock, and panic. Jennifer's father stood, said something to the group, and walked out of the restaurant. I watched him cross the street to the newsstand. He picked up Time, examined the cover closely, read the headline. Then he looked directly at the coffee shop where I sat. Our eyes met through the window. He glanced down at the magazine, then back at me. Recognition. He walked into the coffee shop. "Excuse me." He approached my table. "Are you Rachel Morrison?" I closed my laptop. "I am. Edward Carter." He extended his hand. "I just saw the Time magazine cover." "That's you, isn't it? The pharmaceutical investigation story." "Yes, sir. I read your Atlantic piece last week. Absolutely extraordinary journalism. The depth of research, the whistleblower testimony. That investigation is going to change industry regulation." "Thank you. That's the goal." He gestured to the chair. "Hey, Of course." He sat still, holding the magazine. "This is remarkable. I serve on the board of Carter Memorial Hospital. We've been following your investigation closely. The pharmaceutical company you exposed supplies several of our medications. Your reporting potentially saved lives at our facility. I'm glad it had an impact." "Impact? You exposed a cover-up that could have killed thousands. You're on the cover of Time magazine." He paused. "Aren't you Marcus Morrison's sister?" "I am. You're having coffee alone while your family celebrates your brother's promotion across the street?" I chose my words carefully. The table was at capacity. They suggested I work here and join after brunch. His expression hardened. "At capacity. I see." He glanced back at the restaurant where my family was clearly agitated. "Does your family know about this?" He held up the magazine. "Not yet. The issue just hit stands this morning." "And the Atlantic investigation?" I mentioned I was working on a corporate story. They weren't very interested in details. He was quiet. "Ms. Morrison, would you join us at the table? I think there's been a significant oversight in seating arrangements." "That's not necessary." "I insist. Besides, I have questions about your investigation process." He walked out before I could protest. Through the window, I watched him cross back to the Pemberton. He walked to the table, said something while holding up the magazine. Everyone stared at the cover. My phone started buzzing. "Marcus." "Dead." I ignored them all. Edward was still talking, gesturing toward the coffee shop, toward me. Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear. Jennifer looked confused. Then Edward pulled out his phone, made a call, spoke briefly. He gestured for someone to follow him. The entire table stood. All 10 of them. They crossed the street toward the coffee shop. The door opened. My family filed in, led by Edward Carter, still carrying time-like evidence. Rachel, Dad started. We just saw. Ms. Morrison is joining us at the table, Edward interrupted. I've asked the restaurant to bring another chair. We have a great deal to discuss about her investigation. Marcus found his voice. Rachel, why didn't you tell us about Time magazine? You didn't ask about my work. You were too busy deciding I wasn't successful enough to sit at your celebration table. Jennifer's mother stepped forward. You're the journalist who exposed medtech pharmaceuticals? The cover story about corporate accountability. Yes, ma'am. My sister takes 3 of the medications your investigation flagged. You may have saved her life. The coffee shop had gone quiet. Other customers were watching, some pulling out phones. Edward spoke again. I've cancelled our current table and requested a table for 12. Ms. Morrison will be joining us. I want to hear more about her methodology for investigating corporate fraud. Dad's face was red. Of course Rachel should join us. There was a misunderstanding. There was no misunderstanding, I said quietly. You told me the table was for successful family members. That you needed the seating to reflect achievement. Those were your words. Mom's eyes filled. We didn't know about Time magazine. You didn't know because you never asked about my work. You assumed freelance journalism meant I was unsuccessful. Jennifer spoke for the first time. I read your Atlantic piece. It was incredible. Why didn't Marcus tell me his sister was the Rachel Morrison? Marcus couldn't meet her eyes. Edward checked his phone. The table is ready. Shall we? The walk across the street was silent and awkward. The restaurant staff had prepared a larger table, still by the windows. The newsstand, with my face on 24 magazine covers, was prominently visible. We sat. I ended up between Edward Carter and his wife, Patricia. My family was scattered around the table, looking uncomfortable. Edward ordered champagne. I'd like to make a toast. To Rachel Morrison, whose investigative journalism exemplifies the highest standards of the profession. Your pharmaceutical investigation has triggered federal inquiries and will likely result in significant industry reform. He raised his glass. Everyone else followed awkwardly. To Rachel. They echoed it. To Rachel. The brunch that followed was surreal. Edward and Patricia asked detailed questions about my investigation. How I'd found whistleblowers, verified clinical trial data, navigated legal review. My family sat mostly silent, picking at food. Jennifer's parents asked about my other work, previous investigations, career trajectory. They listened attentively, asked thoughtful questions, treated my work as serious and valuable. Marcus barely spoke. He'd planned this brunch to celebrate his partnership, to impress the Carters. Instead, Jennifer's father was ignoring him to discuss investigative journalism with the sister Marcus had excluded. The brunch ended around 2 p.m. As we stood to leave, Edward pulled me aside. Rachel, I sit on the board of the Carter Foundation. We fund investigative journalism initiatives. I'd like to discuss a potential grant for your work. Are you available this week? I'd be honored. He handed me his card. Call my assistant. Patricia hugged me. What you do matters. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. Jennifer approached. I'm sorry about the seating situation. That was incredibly disrespectful. Thank you. Marcus is realizing he made a mistake. I glanced at my brother, who stood apart looking miserable. My family waited awkwardly as the Carters said goodbye. When the Carters left, Dad approached. Rachel, we need to talk. About what? About this morning. The seating. We didn't know about Time. You didn't know because you never cared to know. You decided freelance journalism meant failure and treated me accordingly. Mom stepped forward. We're proud of you. We should have shown that better. You're not proud of me. You're embarrassed that you excluded me in front of the Carters. Then they found out I'm on the cover of Time magazine. Marcus finally spoke. Rachel, I'm sorry. I suggested you sit at the coffee shop. That was wrong. You suggested it because you were embarrassed by me. Because you needed your family to look successful and I didn't fit that image. I made a mistake. You made a choice. You chose to exclude your sister because her career didn't impress you. Jennifer touched Marcus's arm. We should go. They left. My parents stood uncertainly. What do you want from us? Dad asked. Nothing. You're still our daughter. Then act like it. Not when I'm on magazine covers, but when I'm doing the work. When I'm chasing stories that matter. I walked away, leaving them on the sidewalk. The next morning my phone exploded. The Time issue had gone viral. My pharmaceutical investigation was trending. News outlets requested interviews. The Carter Foundation called about grant funding. My family called multiple times. I didn't answer. 3 days later, Marcus showed up at my apartment. Can we talk? I let him in. Jennifer's father hasn't stopped talking about your work. He's recommending you to foundation boards, connecting you with journalism organizations. He's more excited about your career than my partnership. And that bothers you. It makes me realize how badly I screwed up. I was so focused on impressing the Carters that I excluded my own sister. And it turns out the thing that impressed them most was the sister I excluded. I didn't do my work to impress anyone, Marcus. I know. That's why it matters. He was quiet. I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not because it embarrassed me, but because I treated you like you didn't matter. You do matter. Your work matters. It wasn't absolution, but it was honest. Thank you. Can we try again? As siblings. I considered it. Maybe. But I need you to understand, I'm not going to change my career to fit the family's image of success. I don't want you to. I want to understand your work. Actually understand it. 6 months later, I won a Polk Award for the pharmaceutical investigation. My family attended the ceremony. They sat in the audience and applauded when my name was called. Marcus brought Jennifer. Dad brought Mom. They listened to my acceptance speech about accountability journalism. Afterward, Dad approached. I read your latest investigation. The environmental contamination story. It's powerful work. You read it. I'm reading everything you publish now. I should have been doing that all along. It wasn't perfect. The relationships didn't fully heal. Some wounds run too deep. But it was real. Honest. Based on who I actually was, not who they wanted me to be. I continued my work. Investigations that exposed corruption, protected vulnerable people, held power accountable. Sometimes my family understood. Sometimes they didn't. But I never again let their opinions determine my worth. Because the work mattered. The stories mattered. And I mattered, magazine cover or not.